Kongpan Pramod Nanjithya. I'm MBA 2000 and currently serve as the Deputy President of the Alumni Association, and we just founded the Sasin Entrepreneurship Center together with Ajahn Nick only last month. And this is our first talk that we're going to do every month. This is the first one. We didn't expect, we only expect about 10-15 people because we started quite late. We only talked about it last week with our speaker here, David. So glad to see many of you here. So we're going to do about 45 minutes talk with Q&A, and then afterwards we're going to have networking. We're going to have some wine, some Mexican finger food, chips, and all that. Okay. So today I'm delighted to have our first speaker, David Shelters. David possesses 20 years of entrepreneurial experience as a founder, co-founder, financial advisor, or mentor to numerous tech startups, both in Asia and in America. He lives in Thailand now, and serves as board advisor to several tech startups. He also serves as mentor and pitch judge at numerous events, such as 3-Day Startup and the MAI Bangkok Business Challenge, and also lecturer. All right. Sorry, he had some slides here. Okay, he's also the editor of Thailand Startup Review and author for the Startup Guide for Technopreneur. As I said before, advisory, he's been keynote speaker on many events, and lastly he had, academic wise, he's a lecturer at Thammasat University, Bangkok University, and then author of this Technopreneur. This is his first book. He's having his second book coming out soon, right, David? Bootstrap. All right. So please give David a warm welcome. Please, David. And then our moderator today is Sid Surasit Sachdev. He's MBA 2012. He was in the XRS team, the business plan competition team that went to Texas to the World Championship, and they got into the finals. Sid now is also an entrepreneur. He's started up his own app called Hungry Hub, okay, and he's also helping us with the entrepreneurial center as well. So please welcome Sid. So he's going to be the moderator today.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here, aside with David Shelters. So, first of all, I think, David, I've seen your background. You have like a finance background. So, what made you change from financial background to like entrepreneurship?
Yes, my background actually in school is liberal arts, history, political science, and international affairs. And but once I graduated, I decided I wanted to do something in business. So it's a lot of self-taught, and I did go to business school in America and started learning business and finance. But I've been advising tech startups for the last 20 years. I don't know anything about technology. I bought my first smartphone, and I still haven't downloaded an app yet. But I've been advising tech startups for 20 years. But certainly not from the marketing end or the tech end. But I had some investment banking background. I worked for SunTrust Bank in America, and I worked on the syndicated loan trading desk where I learned how to structure deals. Using much bigger deals than what's involved with startups. But it was a great learning experience. It was a bittersweet experience because before that I was a currency trader. I started the the smallest commodity trading advisor, registered commodity trading advisor in the world. It was mostly on a dare. So back in 1995, I was in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was worked for I went to a Hong Kong-based a shop that was trading currencies on the spot market, and I met a friend there. He was a finance person, and I just got finished my graduate degree for political risk, and I was using my political risk models to predict the movements in the currency rates. And my friend was a technical guy, a finance guy. We were using the candlestick charts and using the technicals to pick the timing of it. And we just ended up working really well, and we ended up starting advising people that were trading their own money there. And we found out that the Hong Kong-based outfit was really ripping people off on the spreads. And so, but there was two other investors there who decided to take us and go on. And so, by accident, I did my first startup. And I thought that was unique, but as the last 20 years, I found out that a lot of startups actually happen that way, just by accident. And so our first startup, we wanted to register as a CTA. Our two senior colleagues were going to help us with that. But they both had marital problems and both had to leave. So it was just us, two 25-year-olds, and we're trying to figure out how to do it. And people said, well, you can't be a CTA. CTAs are like Merrill Lynch, Dean Witter, big companies. You have to be big to do this. And we kind of took it as a dare. And we figured out a way to sponsor ourselves and register it. And we were the smallest CTA in the world. It was two 25-year-old kids with no money. And we were doing something that really is supposed to have millions of dollars of capitalization to do. And so it was, that was my first taste of being an entrepreneur. And since then, I've always wanted to do that. And I'm kind of like a geek wannabe. I want to be around creative people. I'm not creative myself as far as technology, but I really get inspired and like working around techies.
That's interesting. Now moving a bit further closer to Thailand. I heard that you've been here in Thailand for past 6, 7 years, right?
6 years, yeah.
So can you give everyone a brief about what's the history of Thai startups and how has it changed in the past 5 to 10 years, and what has made the change?
So when I got here in 2008, there was no startup community whatsoever. It was just a small group of expats talking about it, how nice it would be to do that. But there's a lot of good Thai tech talent here. Since 1997, Thailand has invested heavily in tech education here, and it's really paying dividends. However, for much of that time period after 1997, they were graduating and working for the SAPs and IBMs of the world, and they were doing non-innovative work. And it was kind of a waste of the tech talent. The Thai tech talent is very unique in this part of the world. Most of the tech education here in Southeast Asia is done by rote, by memory. So if you go to India or China, if you give them a project to do, and it's very specific how to do it and stuff, they can do it. They can do it efficiently. But if they have to think of creative solutions for something, they have to do something that's solve a problem. That's where they're very weak at. But Thailand, the education system for tech education is similar to the West in that they really learn critical thinking, problem-solving skills. So the tech talent that graduates here is comparable to tech talent that you see in America or Asia. Of course, much cheaper to operate and do R&D here in Thailand. And so, this is something that is a great opportunity for Thailand to rebrand itself and become really the center of innovation in Asia. So this is the hardest thing about starting a startup community is having the tech talent developed. It takes on, but we've had it all the way. But we lacked in everything else in 2008, but we had the talent. So there's a handful of us expats decided, we got to get it to the point where we knew that we couldn't do it ourselves. At some point, the Thais have to take over and take the leadership and take over the community. But we thought we tried to do some community building, and there was a bar camp. We had an annual bar camp here that was mostly for tech enthusiasts. And we started kind of using that and start having informal groups start spinning off of that. And we started getting organized, and We did a mentor matching program. We started IT Startup Association of Thailand, just mostly expats. So for an expat to try to register an association here is very difficult. The lawyers, it was like political hot potato. Lawyers, we spent 2 years trying to find a lawyer that would help us register. But we didn't register the association, but all the work helped us organize ourselves. And we started getting more Thais to participate, and things really started taking off around 2009, 2010. And then it went from no community to community building phase to dysfunctional community, where we had parts and pieces of a startup ecosystem, but they weren't really functioning well. And then to a functional community right around mid of 2012. I think one of the big catalysts was when Hubba opened up the first co-working space in June of 2012. Now we had a physical meeting place. Now we had a place to bring investors. We had places where there can be cross-fertilization of ideas. That is my marking point when we went from dysfunctional to functional community. And from there on, then you can have events there and you have workshops and then more co-working spaces start open. And these were Thais that did this. So from like 2011 on, really, the events, the startup events, everything was taken over by the Thais. And that's when really things start taking over, because I think we were right from the beginning. Once the Thais took over, then things were just going to grow exponentially.
Yeah, I think that's clear. So what's the current progress in terms of Thailand comparing to ASEAN countries? Because given the AEC thing is opening up, and I think that's a question in a lot of Thais' mind, that there might be some competition coming in very soon. So in terms of overall picture and in terms of funding as well, I want you to elaborate a bit about that.
So when we look at all the Asian countries, you look at the different ways to criteria to evaluate a startup ecosystem. Everybody's pretty much even, except there's 2 countries. Singapore is way over everybody, all the other countries, as far as financing and VCs and fund, to be able to fundraise. But Thailand is head over shoulders over everybody else on tech talent, a pool of tech talent. And everybody, and every other category, everybody's pretty much even, pretty much even. But those 2 countries have a particular decided advantage in those 2 areas. And so, but Thailand's one of the best places to bootstrap in the world. And people recognize this. You get articles out of New York City, and people, always rate Thailand's one of the best places to bootstrap in the world. But Thailand's one of the worst places in the world to do business. Singapore is the opposite. Singapore is one of the best places in the world to do business, but it's so expensive. It's one of the worst places in the world to bootstrap. You would not want to start a startup in Singapore because it's very expensive, to pay the tech talent and stuff like that. So what happened was, back around 2009, 2010, we started putting the Singapore and Thai startup community start working together, because the Singapore investors, they had more money than they had startups to invest in. And we had all these startups that started to form that were really talented. We didn't have any money. We were at this proverbial tin cup, 3 or 4 years ago. There was no funding at all. And so working together, we've really helped each other out. Now there's deal flow. But the thing is that, it's still difficult. What happens is, in Thailand, once you get to Series A funding, once you get out of the seed stage, if you want to get further funding, we have to register your company in Singapore or Hong Kong. The regulations here, the repatriation of funds. You could be the next Facebook, but if you're investing in the next Facebook that's Thai registered, you can't even get your money out. You can't even get the profits out. And then the taxes and the monthly filings, and it's just, the work permit requirements. There's like 5 or 6 different departments areas where it's just absolutely prohibitive to register a business here, and for foreign investors or even Thai investors to invest in. There's no exit if you're a Thai registered company. Everybody's exit is outside. And so, but for Thai startups, we have a workaround. It takes 1 morning to fly a company to Singapore and register them as a Singapore entity. Then we can get funding for them. We can get public funding from Singapore government for a Thai company that's registered in Singapore. So that's the workaround. But what's happening is Thailand's losing the branding. You know, if you go to my website, Thailand Startup Review, there's a directory part, and I have a directory of startups. And at the end of that section, I have a listing of all the fundings, all the venture fundings in the last few years, and links to the articles for each one. Every single one of those startups are registered in either Singapore and Hong Kong. They're Thai startups. All development work, everything was done by Thai. Everything's here, but they're registered in Singapore and Hong Kong. And so what happens is when those guys have exits, you know, there's going to be the headlines. You know, hotel quickly exit $100 million. Hong Kong-based company exit $100 million. They're a Thai company. They're a Thai startup. So Hong Kong and Singapore are going to get the branding. They're going to get the recognition, and Thailand's going to lose out on it. You know, and plus all the real you know the extra the multiple effect of having a business and being successful. You know, is not just we're talking about the 2 or 3 startup founders that are employed. We're talking about, you know, the vendors and everybody else that helps the economy, the local economy, when you have a successful startup. So this is really where we are at. Funding, there's no problem. If you're an investment grade startup in Thailand, we can get funding for you, because everywhere in the world, there's Silicon Valley, Austin, Texas, Europe. Everybody sees Thailand now. Everybody recognizes the talent. And now we have no problem getting funding, but we're going to have to register you outside of Thailand. You know, and so that's kind of like the one thing we have to work out on the government side. But the talent's here, and if we and the Thai startups are really going out there and making a name for themselves. A few years ago, it was just people, you know, how are we going to help the branding? You know, every time a Thai startup went out to do an international competition, they win, and that really helped us. You know, where it's like, you know, why every time we send them to Silicon Valley or send them to, you know, Singapore, they win the competition. You know, and people start taking notice because we have the talent. Now, what we need to do here inside, and this has to do with Sasin, you know, is that these tech kids, they're really good at tech solutions. They're really good technologists. But to have a complete team, you need business people. So you need four people on a startup. You need a haggler, which is a finance guy like me who's going to negotiate. You need a hustler. He's the biz dev guy. He's the guy who's going out and making strategic partnerships, dealing with vendors and stuff like that, marketing. Those are the 2 business people. And these are the type of people we need out of Sasin, you know, or Bangkok U or Thomas out of the top business schools. And then you have the tech kids. So you have the 2. You have what we call a hipster. He's the UI designer, makes the site look good or whatever. And then you have the hacker. He's the coder. So you have those 4 H's. You have a complete startup team. And so now we're trying to get the Sasin graduates to join with the tech kids that are already out in the mainstream startup community and try to make even more competitive, good startup teams.
Interesting. I like the 4H. So what makes Thai companies attractive to get funding? Like, what are the things that you would advise a Thai startup before they go out to raise funding?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
So there's 2 things. There's internal and kind of external. So the internal thing is actually what I just said, having a complete founding team. That's what the investors look at the most. It's now about the teams. Technology used to be really important 5 or 10 years ago. Now everything's done open source. You know, people don't even have time. The startup life cycles went from 5 to 7 years to 2 to 3 years. People don't even have enough time to file IP, you know. And there's really no IP to file because everything's done open source. And so there's a lot of vanity metrics. So people always come to me and say, well, Dave, this country is not very innovative because the number of IP, number of patents filed has gone down. That means absolutely nothing. You know, innovation is more than just technology. It's business models. You know, it's a way to distribute. It's distribution platforms. It's different things that make somebody innovative and differentiate. It is not technology anymore. So the business part of it has actually become more important for a startup. And because the startup life cycles are shorter, that means you got to be more efficient, and you can't make too many detours. You know, you got to really go out there, and you have to have a complete team early on, and you have to have a really good process. And right now, lean and agile is the dominant processes. So there's a lot of things you have to become competitive in. And so that's where on the external end, there's two conventional wisdoms to get institutional funding if you're a Thai startup. One is, like we just said, you have to register outside of Thailand if you want to do Series A and beyond. But the second thing is you have to have a regional growth strategy. Every institutional investor that comes here in Thailand will tell you this, and it's true because institutional investors are looking for exponential returns. So you need exponential growth, and you're not going to get it most likely in your local market. And this not only applies to Thai startups, but any startup in Southeast Asia, even Indonesia and Vietnam, the markets, domestic markets aren't big enough. So you're going to have a regional growth strategy to be able to show that you can scale up to get those returns.
So what would be the right time for a startup to get to the funding level of seed funding or Series A, according to what you've been through?
When it comes to seed funding, Series A and Series B, people really, we got to define it first before I can explain it, because people get those confused. Sometimes people just say just based on the number of the funding round they're in. Seed funding is before your product goes commercial. Seed funding is what you need to develop the idea, and get it to where you have at least a working prototype that's testable. So any kind of funding you get to fund your efforts to get to that point is seed funding. Series A funding is what you get to launch your product. Okay, it's basically idea to product. It's getting out there. And Series B funding is growth. Now you want to, this is where the institutional investors come in. A lot of them coming out from outside Thailand. They want to give you Series B funding because they say, okay, you've proven your product is successful in Thailand. You want to scale out and go to other markets, we're going to give you Series B funding. And so the later stage funding you get, theoretically, the better the valuation of your business, the better price you should get per share. In Southeast Asia, all these funding rounds, the average size is much smaller than, let's say, in Europe and America. So right now in Thailand, a typical seed round will be between 1.5 million and 5 million baht. That would be a typical seed round. A typical Series A round, it's about 400,000 to 700,000 US. So we're talking maybe about 12 to 15 million baht for a Series A round. And a Series B round, we've had a few recent outliers, but Series B rounds usually going to be in the 25 to 35 million baht range. So we just, A-Commerce just had a 10.7 million US dollar funding round. The press is calling it Series A, and I have no idea why they're calling it Series A. It's Series B. It's for growth. Almost all their funding, all that money is going to go to expanding their distribution network all throughout Southeast Asia. Hotel quickly just got another 4.5 million on top of their 1.16 million they got about 6 months ago. Then that's another example. They're a Hong Kong registered company, but all the developers are Thai. The founders are from Europe, and they're based here. And they just started their company October of last year. So they've been able to accomplish all this with their mobile app. And so they're in 12 markets already throughout the region. So it doesn't take too long. If you have a good product, you can rapidly come to that exit very soon. They probably have another few years, and they'll be exiting. But it's going to, like I said, the headlines are going to be Hong Kong-based startup has a nice exit, and they're Thai.
Okay. Could you explain a bit? I've been hearing a lot about incubators and accelerators, and I think people are getting mixed up about that topic. So I think, could you explain a little bit?
Yeah, this is it's kind of bothersome for me. Incubators and accelerators are two totally different things. Accelerators become kind of like a fad word. So people sometimes they do an incubator and they want to call it an accelerator. And accelerator is kind of later stage, so that means theoretically whatever company is going through that, should theoretically get higher valuation. So there's a few reasons why they do it. An incubator is idea to product. It's really early stage. Incubators are usually public incubators. So the biggest incubator here in Thailand is Software Park. And my friend Charles, who I've worked with for 6 years, he's the director of Software Park now. And we're very fortunate because he has real practical business experience. He's not from government. And he knows all the lean and agile processes and things like that. He worked for my friend at Reuters when I first met him 6 years ago. And so he's has an aggressive campaign to really contribute to the startup community and brand Software Park. So usually the reason why it's public, whether it's a university running it, maybe a corporate sponsor doing it, or the government like Software Park, is because it's too early stage for investors really to invest. So an incubator, you might have 35, 40, 50 companies going through, and it's very it's kind of risky to invest in equity, get equity in all these companies when 90% of them are going to fail, and then it's so early stage you can't really tell which ones are going to succeed. So it's usually incubator is all about developing ideas for startups, but also teaching entrepreneurial skills. So when they graduate, at least maybe it's not the startup that they end up graduating with from the incubator that they end up ultimately being, but at least they have the entrepreneurial skills to go into the mainstream startup community. And then accelerators later stage. This is late seed stage. This is right before they go commercial. An accelerator is for profit. So this is where the investors come in. So the investors would usually be angels that operate the accelerator. The investors invest money in the accelerator. They get percentage equity interest, usually maybe 6 to 8% of the company for each accelerator participant. And then at the end of it, usually it's a batch. It's like boot camp style. It's very intense. And at the end of the 3 months, there's a demo day, and each of the participants are pitching in front of institutional investors. And so this is when, in a 3-month period, the angels can get a really nice return, at least on paper, because you're going to get a higher valuation than what you get when you get into the accelerator. And so the incubator, when they graduate from the incubator, which might be 6 months, a year long, maybe angels will invest at that point if some of the successful ones come out. But it's really about skill building and idea generation. So they're very two different things. And so we have several incubators and accelerators now. Software Park, of course, the biggest. We have DTAC and AIS were the first corporate accelerators. It's kind of interesting when you use the definition of incubator accelerator. DTAC and AIS is kind of difficult because they focus exclusively, at least for the first batches, on mobile app developers. So they weren't even really startup teams; they're just mobile app developers. And developing a mobile app, you can go from idea to market very quickly. So you can be like an incubator / accelerator in 3 months with a mobile app. So that kind of makes it kind of blurry. But they deserve a lot of credit for being the first corporations to engage the startup community. We tried for many years to get some Thai corporates to come in and engage the startup community, because this is where they're going to get the innovation from. This is no secret. This is what's done in Europe and America. The big corporations in the Western countries, they know that they can't be really innovative stuff in-house. So they either partner with or acquire startups to get their innovation. And this is what Thai companies are starting to realize. And with ASEAN coming up, they are going to now have competitors in their own home marketplace. And so they're going to have to learn to be more innovative and competitive. And so this is a really good time for them to get engaged.
Cool. You were talking about regional growth strategy, which I found a little interesting. Can you give some examples of companies, maybe in Thailand, that are doing that?
Yeah, so e-commerce is the perfect example. E-commerce is actually a shoot-off from Ardent Capital. Ardent Capital is one of the few local VCs. They've actually been here in Thailand for about 10, 15 years, but they're always private equity, Series B level, and they didn't really have much of a pipeline. But when they recognized the startup community was heating up 2 or 3 years ago, then they went to earlier stages started what they call Ardent Labs. I know for a few of the Sasin alums, went through Ardent Labs and have some successful startups. But they came up with the idea of e-commerce. E-commerce is a logistical support for e-commerce startups. So this is really going to be really important for Thailand to stake their claim to be a center of innovation here. They're really playing an important role. The people that run e-commerce are very experienced. Peter Kopas, the COO, he's a Rocket Internet guy. He's the founder of Zlara here in Thailand. Had 6,000 people under him. Adrian Vansel has few successful exits in Silicon Valley. He also had raised a lot of funding in Germany. They're all part of Rocket Internet. Paul, I believe Paul's a graduate here as well. Paul Rock.
No, I'm not sure.
But him and his brother John are the Thai partners in this, and they bring a lot of finance and marketing experience. So they have a great team, and they just got their $10.7 million follow-up funding. And what they're doing is, actually, Agent just told me just in the last meeting. He said, Dave, we do everything for e-commerce startups. All they need to do is sourcing and branding, and that's really amazing because the hardest part of an e-commerce site is the logistics of it. Okay, you can get 1 million customers in Vietnam and 1 million in Indonesia and whatever, and 5 million here in Thailand, but the customers, you got to serve them. You have to deliver the stuff. You have to give them support. Customer support and all this other stuff. This is where e-commerce becomes very expensive to have an e-commerce business. E-commerce business to launch is very cheap. Everything's online. You can put up an e-commerce site very easy. It's a matter of weeks to do that. And there's ways to acquire a lot of clients, a lot of customers. That's not so difficult either. The really difficult thing is actually delivering and serving the customers, and you grow so exponentially. That's a really big challenge. So they're filling that void, not just for Thai startups, for startups all over Southeast Asia, and they're going to use the last funding to really. They're already in Singapore. They're already in Indonesia. They're already in Philippines. I think next they want to go to Malaysia and Vietnam. So they're really. They're going out there making the strategic partnerships in these local countries, in these various countries, to provide the logistics.
And what about if any example of any Thai companies that don't have a regional growth strategy but is still surviving?
Yes. So I like to use the example of Ukpi. My friend Kun Mu started it. Mu's a great guy, and he's so generous with his time helping the startups now. But he is one of the pioneering Thai startup entrepreneurs here. And his business has actually been around for, I think, 7 or 8 years. And what happened was he started too early because there wasn't any community support. There was no really funding, later stage funding for him. So what happened was his company is very successful in Thailand. He has 90% of the online publishing market here in Thailand. It turned into like a cash cow, and he's been very successful. He's been very successful for the last several years. The problem was he didn't have a regional growth strategy to go in these other marketplaces, and it wasn't really his fault. Just like there was no one to partner with to go out there and do it, And so, he's now he just got some more funding, and he's going regional now because he has a great product. But that's kind of like that's what can happen. You can be successful in Thailand in your own marketplace, and you can take 90% of the market, but you're not close to an exit yet because the market's not big enough. So he's not a failure. It's just that the market that he captured is not big enough, and now he's going out right now and trying to capitalize on his success here.
So from what I'm hearing from all this that you're mentioning about the regional growth strategy and everything, the only thing seems to be that Thai companies have to be registered overseas to get access to funding. And isn't Thailand losing out on this? Is there any way to get Thai companies to stay in Thailand and
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of government officials at the SET and things like that, and the private equity guys here. There's a lot of Thai private equity companies here, and they come to say, Dave, we have no deal flow, we have no pipeline, but we know the startup community is doing so well, nothing's coming to us. And I point out to like, you guys are at Series B, you guys are a later stage. You're not going to have a pipeline because all the best Thai startup tech companies that we develop here, if we're registered in Singapore and Hong Kong before they get to their stage where you can get them. And if the private equity companies here aren't getting a pipeline of deal flow, guess what? The MI and the SET aren't going to get their IPOs either because the PE guys are the ones that underwrite to do the IPOs. So they said, well, how can we help the startup community? I said, no, you're not phrasing it right. We're fine. It takes one morning for us to register a company in Singapore and Hong Kong. You guys need to help yourselves. You need to help Thailand. Thailand's losing the branding thing. Singapore, they want to they want to protect the IP. They don't care about employees. They don't care about how many employees in a new Singapore company. They're concerned about the branding. They want to be the home of the next Facebook. Okay, same with Hong Kong. A lot of these other countries are view things much differently than we do here. They want the branding thing. Here we're still, we have like what, 0.7% unemployment, but we're all very, very concerned about, how many employees. And right now it works out for both companies, right? Countries, right? So the Thais get to stay here and work, okay? And the way it works is the Thai companies still exist. The Thai company does basically the software development for the Singapore registered company. The Singapore registered company pays the Thai company for their work. So it's like a cost center. So Thailand still keeps their employees, and the employees are still getting paid their salary. But all the investment funds go to Singapore, all the IP is protected in Singapore, all the taxable income is going to go to Singapore, and so this has just been the setup, and there's really nothing illegal about it. It's the Thai companies are getting paid for their work that they're doing here, But this is the only way for them to get funding, and it's really unfortunate. And so actually last year, July 2nd of last year, I spoke at the ICT Advisory Conference. The Thai Joint Chambers of Commerce gave me just an 8-minute spot to speak, and I was excited. It was like therapeutic for me because I've been like grinding my teeth. I was like, oh, I'm going to get a chance to talk in front of policymakers. Good, so I presented. I had a policy recommendation called Innovative Venture. So you have the BOI, the Board of Investment, have their BOI approved companies. So that works good for a company in a traditional industry. It's really made because of the Japanese auto manufacturers, right? We'll give you land use rights, give you customs reduction in custom dues for importing machinery and stuff like that. All the things, all these benefits that have nothing to do with doesn't help software companies, and service companies in general. So the only two things that BOI approval gives a startup is a tax holiday, which isn't that good, particularly when you don't have any taxable income. And they do give you the 4 Thai, they waive the 4 Thai per 1 work permit rule, which is nice. That's one reason to do it. But you know what? It takes you 3 to 6 months to register and pay all the lawyers all this money to register a BOI approved company. And guess what? You're still a Thai registered company, so you're not going to be able to get funding anyway. It takes one morning and 6,000 Sing to register you in Singapore. So, and you don't have to worry about all the other stuff that the BOI gives. So you don't have to, the first 100,000 Singapore dollars is tax-free in Singapore. You don't have to get a special approval for that. And your IP is protected. Everything's done over there. You don't have monthly filings. So I have people here in Thailand go, so what's the VAT tax in Singapore? 0. They don't have a VAT tax. You don't have to file a monthly VAT thing. You pay 400 Singapore dollars a year to submit annual statements. It's not even an audit. Okay, that's all you need to do. Okay, here you have every month. I have an amity treated company. I'm American, so I had that privilege to get an amity treated company here. I was paying 10,000 baht a month minimum just to get my work permit here. because for me to keep my work permit, I have to pay at least 3,900 baht a month to get shared office space, because they don't count virtual office space. That's to meet the immigration requirements, so I can have my work permit. 3,900 baht a month. I had to do VAT filings. I had to pay accountants a minimum of 3,000 baht a month to take care of all this. And then I had to pay minimum personal income tax on a salary that I didn't even pay. I didn't have money to pay myself. For 3 years here, I didn't make any money. So I had to pay, literally 10,000 baht a month minimum just to keep my work permit here. So we really needed to find a way. And so what I did with the innovative venture, there's 5 or 6 different departments that would really drastically have to change their laws to really have an effect to make this attractive place for startups to even stay here. Whether it's Thai or expat founded, it doesn't matter, just to stay here. So and it's really hard to change laws here in Thailand. Laws are really hard to change. And so I'm looking at the BOI thing, I'm thinking maybe we just have to make exceptions. We just need to treat, and some of the laws that are in effect really do make sense. They're not bad laws. It's just that startups need to be on a different regime than regular traditional companies. So instead of trying to change the laws of 5 or 6 different departments, I thought maybe we just have a vehicle, what I call innovative venture. So to be an innovative venture, you have to prove that you are introducing innovation to Thailand, whether it's a model, a product, or whatever. And I already put this up in front of SET, but I figure SET would actually do the designation, but Software Park would do actually the qualification, whether you're innovative venture or not. And so once you're an innovative venture, then the equity holders, the founders, whether it be expat or Thai, have certain privileges, and the workers have certain privileges. So you almost treat it like an association. You don't have all this monthly filings and stuff like that. You don't have to worry about having 4 Thai per one work permit. The repatriation of funds are waived. All these type of things. And so what we want to do is we want to get startups here to stay here, because really where the taxable income comes in is later on when they grow. But all that's going to Singapore and Hong Kong. So this is I throw up a solution up there it's still, I put it up maybe 2 years ago, early last year, and I think it's still, I look back at it and it's like, this would still work if we can get somebody to go ahead and support this. It would really help the startups. But if you only do 1 of the 6 or 2 of the 6, it's still we're not getting anywhere, on this.
Yep. So, and if that gets implemented and Thai companies stay, where will they get access to fundings? Is there like angel networks, or is there anything that is existing?
So what we're trying to do is, we have a lot of VCs, most of them outside of Singapore, that take care of the Series A. Before we had a Series A funding gap. Now that's taken care of. That's not a problem. The seed funding level, it's usually just typically friends and family. And what we're trying to do is, there's not a lot more startups now, and institutional investors still aren't interested in investing so early. So we need more angel investors here. So we're trying to organize angels, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to have an informal angel investor network. And so I think later we'll put up the email, but if anybody was interested, what I want to do is, we have a lot of really good Thai startups that need seed funding. And what I want to do is I just want to have a little angel network like they have in Singapore, where maybe every 2 months I organize a pitch event. So individual angel investors just come and listen to the pitch, and they can make their own individual decisions whether to invest in these startups or not. And because they're in a group of angels, they might decide, we'll mitigate our risk and maybe invest as a group, or invest 2 or 3 together. So this might be a way to do it. There was no angel investors up to maybe 2 or 3 years ago here in Thailand. And there was really there's nobody to pitch. There's nothing. It was very dysfunctional. And usually angel investors are formerly successful tech entrepreneurs. This is what you see in America and Europe. But the tech industry here is very young. So we're only seeing our first pioneering tech entrepreneurs, and they have indeed turned around and are becoming our first angel investors. So I do have a group of angels that are interested, and I'm always looking to add more. If people are interested to do it, it's very informal, nothing structured. But if you're interested, look at some of the promising startups. We can do a pitch event, and you can join. And every 2 months or so, we bring in the startups and pitch to you.
That's good. Interesting. I think that's all the question I have for you today. I just want to throw the mic to the audience, and maybe if anyone has any questions, and we can open the floor to questions. Any questions? Yep.
Okay, so being in the industry for the past 20 years, I believe, you probably seen what happened in '98. Do you feel any resemblance of any kind to that period?
As far as the economy here, and
As so far as the funding condition for the tech startup, the valuation they get, so on.
yeah, so what's really good is just in the last year or so, the quality of term sheets have really improved dramatically, and the reason why is because more sophisticated institutional investors have come in. So what happens is when you're a young startup, when you're in a young startup ecosystem, you get a lot of investors that are kind of like maybe take advantage of the situation because there's not too much competition, and they give and they're not sophisticated, so they really don't know really how to structure a term sheet. They're all just concerned about they're more worried about the risk and protecting themselves than really funding a startup and giving them the decision-making flexibility they need to succeed. And this was the case here. Even we started getting funding, interested investors maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but for 2 years or so, the term sheets I saw were just really, really poor, really bad. Even the investments we got from Singapore was really bad because there wasn't any competition. But in the last year or so, we've had some more sophisticated institutional investors come to Thailand. 500 Startups is one good example, Silicon Valley based. It's actually the biggest accelerator in the world. So Dave McClure, actually, the Geeks on a Plane, they're coming in tomorrow. And I've actually received Dave and Kali Ning, who's actually based here. He's their venture partner here in Thailand. And so he could be based anywhere in Southeast Asia, but he's based here in Bangkok because this is where the most promising startups are. So they're here, and they're really the first Silicon Valley based company investor to really base themselves here. But what happens is when 500 startups show up, and Cyber Agent Ventures out of Japan just opened up an office at Hubba a few months back, all the other investors have to say, wow, we have to give better term sheets because we're going to lose the business. We're going to lose the best talent to these guys, So it's really had an effect of these term sheets have gotten much better, and just in the last year or so. And so startups are getting better valuations. But the funding is there. And as far as the political risk, it's very interesting. I get people that call from America, Europe, and ask, and say, look, the startups, interestingly, when you invest in a Thai startup, remember you're investing in a Singapore or Hong Kong registered company. So the political risk is really not there because that actually protects yourself on the political side too. So it's kind of like the pitch of assurance to investors. Hey, you're still investing in this Thai talent, but you're investing in a outside of Thailand. So that's actually been a kind of a saving grace in the last 6 to 12 months as well.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes, Abram.
Just wanted to ask you about a potential
Nice
startup.
to see you again.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask you about a potential startup bubble. Like you got Uber getting valuation of $17 billion. Do you think there's a startup bubble forming where companies are getting extreme valuations and they're nowhere near profitability or can't even get there in the next 10 years?
No, I actually think the opposite. I think that we've had relatively small exits so far, even with Uber at 7. We still have actually a long way to go up in the exits here in Southeast Asia. And I think with Asian, when we really the market's integrated and we have a bigger marketplace, you'll see those exits get much bigger actually. The bubble I see, and I see locally here in Thailand now, the startup community has heated up so much that now we're screaming for tech talent with entrepreneurial skills, because the number of startups just from what I'm observing and going through my directory and how many I'm adding every week or whatever, and dealing with different coworkers, but I've literally tripled the number of startups in just maybe the last 18 months or so. And so so a lot of the VCs are they're asking for help to find the tech talent now, because they have all these portfolio of companies that are experiencing growth. They need to keep on adding the tech talent, and all of a sudden, our big pool of tech talent is getting, is being utilized at a higher percentage, and so this has been actually a concern that's really become apparent in the last 2 or 3 months. We're getting a lot of inquiry. We're getting people say, "Look, we need to, what can we do with tech talent?" And then and this is where we need to get more incubators. It's not enough to graduate people with business skills or graduate people with tech skills. They have to have entrepreneurial skills with it. And so this is the whole thing about it. We really want to have schools, these graduate schools, to have incubator programs. So we're developing the practicums and entrepreneurial skills along with the traditional business and tech.
Yeah, maybe you could try have something to add on that.
I have one question. You say you wanted to start do the angel network, and I think that's very important for the ecosystem. I mean, Sasin alumni has a lot of high net worth individuals. I'm sure they have private equities and that, but how would we go about getting these individuals to become angel investors in startups?
Right now, I'm working with several groups and trying to maybe register an accelerator or get things going on. But really, what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to collect a list of people that are interested in being angel investors. It's not just the money. What's really important about the Sasin alum, the ones that be interested in angel investments, it's not just the money. It's their contacts, their skills, their business experience. Because really, when you're C-level, you really count on the angel investor to give that impart that experience. That's just as critical as the money. And so it's not good enough just to have an investor that just want to get money, but having somebody, let's say, graduate from Sasin. Obviously, Sasin's a great school, and the graduates and alum can bring much more than just the money. So Sasin alum actually make ideal angel investors. Like we were talking about earlier before, it's the key to success for a startup is the distribution and marketing, and you really want to form strategic partnerships for that. And a lot of the Sasin alum hold key positions in big companies, and the companies they work for are looking for increase their innovation as well. So this is actually it's like a marriage made in heaven. This works really good, where there's benefit. It's mutual, and so we would like to see the top graduates, the top alum, the cream of the crop, engage in the startup community, because there's a lot of things for mutual benefit for that.
I guess we have one last question. All right.
I mean, going back to the part you were mentioning earlier about all the example you've given. I mean, my perception of those startups are from the soft side of things. They come up with an app, they come up with certain software that do certain things, and they get ridiculous valuation on it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there's Thai-grown hardware startup. I mean, people who might have certain machines or things that really do the work. I mean, going back to e-commerce example, they do the real stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But they're not that many startups like that. So from your point of view, is it a fair statement to say that VC are more interested in software kind of startup?
Yeah. So that's a really good point. So what actually we've had a little campaign, because we do have a lot of VCs here now, and a lot from Japan, and we've had them from Singapore for quite some time, but recently Japan and Korea have come in, but they're all really looking at e-commerce, looking at the sexy stuff, e-commerce, the consumer internet, So tech startups in those spaces, no problem, we can get you funding. But there's a lot of promising startups that are in spaces that aren't as glamorous, that are definitely investment grade. And so we're still looking for, stable sources of funding for them. You know, one of, if you go to my website, Time Startup Room, my directory of startups, what we did, I categorize them. So I have them like e-commerce, consumer internet, marketplace, social impact, e-learning, m-health. We got them categorized. So it helps try to figure out, what. And what's great about Thailand startup scene is it's really diverse. We got 7 or 8 good ones in like almost every category. I mean, this is very unusual. Usually, if you go to before, when I first got here in Thailand, everything that was successful was gaming. Gaming has always been, this was even before if it was online gaming, right, or mobile gaming. Gaming has always been a big tech industry here. And so the first tech startups successful here were in gaming. And so, but just in the last 3 or 4 years, it's really impressive the diversity that we have. But the VCs are coming in. They're coming in now. They focus on certain areas. There are some really good. I think an area that we're really excel in, that Thailand really excels in, that goes under the radar. It's really hard to get funding for. Usually, you don't get equity investors for. Is social impact ventures. Thailand is really well positioned to produce the best social impact ventures in the world because we have the tech talent, but being a Buddhist country, culture and compassion, all these kind of things are really important. And so you put the tech talent with people that really want to make a positive social impact, and they have a culture of that. You get this really nice mix, and we see that because we have a lot of social impact ventures that are usually the social impact ventures are not investment grade as far as equity investors go, but we have several that actually are. And so right now we're working really hard to get some of the philosophical investors from like Hong Kong and stuff to come in, and some of the bigger organizations that are concerned with social entrepreneurialism to come here to Thailand to see this, because it's a really an area that is very successful here, but we just don't have the funding for it. Change Fusion is a very successful social impact organization here in Thailand, and they just started. Sunit, who's one of the founders of Change Fusion, he started Change Ventures, which is I believe probably the first venture fund for social impact ventures here based in Thailand, and so that's going to start, I think, really doing well. Madi, which is a new co-working space on Ekamai Road, they focus on social impact ventures. So even if you're not a startup, a social impact startup, if you're just a person that wants to make a social impact but doesn't know how to do it, you can go to Madi and you can network and you can work with a startup, whether you're on a volunteer basis. You can have an army of volunteers for social impact ventures. So Madi co-working space is just a great co-working space that my friend Gift is running. She's actually a Thomasat grad, MIM grad, but she's been involved with social impact projects here for about 10 years in Thailand. And so this is an area that, just one area that we could use some more venture funding.
Okay, thank you very much today, David. I'd like to end the talk today, and then there's still some snacks outside, some Mexican food, and some wine for you guys. So thank you everyone for turning up. Thank you.